All right, everyone, welcome back to MS Caretaker Chris. I'm excited to introduce to everyone my beautiful wife, Elena.
Hello.
This is her first time actually videoing with me, doing any kind of video or podcast. And this is a very exciting episode as I get to introduce a collaboration that we did with Elena's brother, Joshua Bueno, and his friend, Brandon Davis, on their podcast, Deep and Wide. To hear the podcast in its entirety, I encourage you to check out the link I will put in the description to Apple Music or to Spotify. That's the only way you'll be able to hear the podcast in the entirety. I will have clips from the podcast that are incorporated into this video, so I highly encourage you to watch the entire video because there's a ton of questions that were answered that I feel are very beneficial to someone diagnosed with MS and their caretakers. So in the first segment that you'll see, Brandon and Joshua actually ask Elena and I some questions about Elena's diagnosis, and then also a few questions about how our lives were changed and the different things that we had to think of or do to educate ourselves on MS.
Hey everybody, welcome to Deep and Wide. My name is Josh.
I'm Brandon. How's it going?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a minute. We haven't had an episode in a little while, so it's good to get back into the swing of things.
Well, today's episode, like I said, we haven't recorded in a while, so I'm really glad we're getting to record and put an episode out. And today's episode is very special to me. I've got my family on today, Brandon. I'm excited.
Hey, nice.
I got my sister and my brother-in-law, Elena and Chris, and I think I've mentioned on here, I'm originally from Maryland, and I moved to North Carolina about 10 years ago, and so they are currently living in Maryland, and today we're going to be talking about, a couple different things, but we're going to be talking about the topic of MS and different health issues and how, I guess, in a way, how these things kind of affect people and families, and then when you get diagnosed with something this big, how does it change your life in a way? And so my sister was diagnosed with it a couple years ago, and I'll let her describe that in a little bit. But it had definitely kind of changed her whole family and our whole family in a way. There's a lot of things that they had to adapt to, and so
absolutely.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and it's going to be a really cool episode, kind of get an insider's edition of things going on, and with my brother-in-law being, as they call it, MS caretaker, and what that means for him. Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. So Brandon, like I said, this is my sister Elena.
Good to meet you. How are you doing?
Nice to meet you. Very good, thank you.
And my brother-in-law Chris.
How's it going, Chris?
So we're having them on today to kind of talk about their experiences. And Chris has a YouTube channel called MS Caretaker Chris. Is that right?
Yep.
And so he puts out different videos of MS awareness and what it means to care for somebody who has this diagnosis. And so we kind of decided, let's all get together and kind of talk about it, because I think it's a very important thing to talk about, not just for our family, but lots of other families. And so obviously, through the years, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened, a lot of history. When was it Elena, when you were diagnosed with MS? How long ago was it?
I was diagnosed February 3rd, 2016.
Okay. What were the thoughts and the feelings you had as you were kind of hearing this diagnosis?
Before I got diagnosed, I had been Googling some things, some symptoms I was having, and I remember just saying, God, please just not let it be MS. I can take anything else, but not this MS, not what I'm seeing. And so when I got the diagnosis, it wasn't that I was shocked, because I wasn't, because as we went down those those symptoms, we could both sit there and say, yeah, I had that, I experienced that. So it was complete fear of the unknown, and what it was going to mean for my life, and what things were going to have to change, and how things were going to be with my kids and the rest of my family. So it was a little bit of relief to know what was going on, that okay, I'm not crazy, there's some, all these things I'm feeling has there's a reason and it has a diagnosis, but it was complete like fear, I think.
When she was diagnosed with MS, I mean, at first it was like, what is this? Like, what are we going to have to deal with? And it was more like not knowing the unknown. Like for me, I had no idea what multiple sclerosis was. So right away it was like education mode, like find out like
Figure it out.
what's going to be changing, what we need to do, how are we going to do this. But we are very thankful of the diagnosis because the doctor that diagnosed her, that was only, you had just started with that doctor as a primary care doctor
Right.
not long before the diagnosis. So it was almost a blessing to have that doctor, because a lot of people have trouble getting a diagnosis of MS right away. They'll actually have to have so many more things happen before they actually get a diagnosis, because MS has so many different symptoms that it could look like 15 other things before they'll actually check for MS through. I mean, they used to do spinal taps, they used to do blood work, but Elena's was found through MRIs. And MRIs they don't just throw MRIs out there, because a lot of people have trouble with getting MRIs because of insurance, that kind of thing, and all too. So, so
Absolutely.
we were really blessed, like almost immediately after one of her big symptoms, which was the sight issue at work. Her doctor actually ordered MRIs because originally they first, and that's the thing, when she first went, her doctor said, well, let me check because I'm hoping you didn't have a stroke. So it was like, because she lost vision in her eye and that kind of thing. So
when she called me back, we had just walked in the door from getting the MRI, and my doctor called
that fast,
and said, the good news is you didn't have a stroke, but the bad news is you have MS. She didn't say, you might have MS, we're going to have to look into this. It was no questions asked because of the number of lesions that I had on my brain and on my spinal cord. There was no doubt. So she immediately got me hooked up with a doctor from Hopkins, and I was diagnosed on the 3rd, and before the end of that month I had my first infusion treatment of Tysabri.
Okay.
What does just random question? What does the infusion do? I know you go to treatments every month, every month?
Every 28 days, yes.
So what does that do for you? What happens in that process there?
So the purpose of an infusion is so that I don't get any new lesions. So I talked about the lesions that showed up on my MRI, that I have multiple. Right. Those lesions will not go away unless there is a cure. So the goal of the medication is to prevent any new lesions. So it's basically to halt the disease in its tracks. And it has, I think, in the 90% is the likelihood that you're not going to get another lesion. Yeah. So that's the purpose of that, and it does lower your immune system, because the whole point of having MS is that your immune system is overactive and it's attacking, the
healthy myelin cells. Yeah. So basically, MS, just to explain so everybody understands what we're talking about too, is basically MS is a disease where your immune system attacks itself. So it attacks the covering of your brain and the covering of your spinal cord, which has a myelin sheath over it. And basically your immune system thinks that myelin sheath is an intruder and that it shouldn't be there. And your immune system kicks in and says, hey, we need to attack this, just like it would if you had a cold or coronavirus or something like that. Your immune system goes to work and it starts to attack those, those bad, that what it thinks is an intruder or something bad. And in this case, with the case of MS, it actually attacks that myelin sheath around your spinal cord and the sheath around your brain, which will cause what they call lesions, and that's what you can see active on MRI. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Gotcha. That kind of answers my follow-up question. I was going to ask, for those who don't know much about MS, and myself included, I really, I haven't heard too much about it. So beyond what it is, which you just said, whatever you're comfortable sharing about it, what are some of the day-to-day challenges of having it, of taking care of somebody with it, that you love, kind of long-term, whatever, like I said, whatever you're comfortable sharing with that, just for our listeners.
So for me personally, one of my biggest issues is walking. So I mentioned I have lesions on my spinal cord. I have quite a few. So you really have to think about each step that you take. So I know most people, you just, say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk, and that's what you do. However, I have to think about every single step. So walking is one of my biggest issues, especially things like stairs, doing 1 foot at a time, making sure that I'm thinking about my foot drop, because that's another issue that comes along with MS is foot drop. So you're more likely to trip if your foot is dropping while you're trying to walk. Another big issue is fatigue. So not just feeling like you're a little tired and I could probably use a nap. It is an exhaustion that I don't know how to explain other than sometimes I can't lift my arms. It's that much where you just have to lay there. I've come home from work in my work clothes and have laid in my bed and not moved. So your body gives you some signs that you're doing too much, and if you do not do something about that, your body will help you with that and just force you to not to be able to do anything. So the fatigue is a really big deal. I have a full-time job, that I have a lot of things going on. Obviously I have kids, those kind of things. So that makes day-to-day life really hard when you need to get things done, but your body's just saying, no, that's not going to happen today. So putting things off, making things priority, and doing things in little bouts instead of, I'm going to take today and I'm going to clean the entire house. Well, that's not probably going to happen. Or if it does, you're going to pay for it for the next few days. So those kind of things.
I think another thing you express from time to time is the MS hug, they call it.
Yeah.
Where it just kind of feels like something's like squeezing you.
Very hard.
Kind of like in a bear hug type feeling when there's like nothing there, and it's kind of, I know she talks about that a lot.
There's numbness and tingling
especially in your
all
legs
the time.
and feet and that kind of thing. The crazy thing about MS too is when she talks about lesions, and we talk about the lesion on the spinal cord and all, a good thing that a lot of people use as an example of how it affects your body is, so imagine you have an extension cord or an electrical cord, and somebody takes and burns a section of it, or takes something and digs out a section of that electrical cord, and if you bend it a little bit, the signal can't get through that electricity can't get through that cord, right? But if you put it back, it can shoot through and kind of get through, but it's damaged, so it really can't get through all the way. Think of MS as like your brain is sending signals to your body to do things, right? All the time. Like everything you do, your brain is sending a signal. So it's a nervous system, it's something that's affecting your nervous system. So your brain's sending all these signals out. For Elena, a lot of times, like she says, with walking. So her mind is telling her body to walk. And we don't even think about it when we do it. We just walk. It's natural. We don't even know our brain's shooting all these signals through to do these things, right? But for her, where it hits one of these lesions and the signal isn't able to basically, it's like, wait a minute, I can't get from point A to point B because now there's a break there, or there's a lesion there that's not able to get that signal through. So now, your body has to find other ways to get that signal through, so it's constantly shooting, and that's when she says she's got to think about, like, really walking. So, like, she's got to constantly say, like, I need this to happen, I need this to happen. And meanwhile, it's doing everything it can to get those signals out to those different parts of the body, and with those different lesions being in different spots and those kind of things, like that's why the symptoms can be so crazy. It may be something with walking for one person, somebody else, like, and just about everybody you talk to that has MS, fatigue is a big thing. But there's other things that come along with it, like memory loss or like having trouble with memory. Some people, we have a support group we're in that you basically can look at each person, and they all might have similar symptoms with certain things. But each person down the line, if you ask them, like, what was their main problem or what was their symptoms that they've had this month, each one of them could probably give you at least one different symptom than the person next to them that they're experiencing. Some people, it's feeling like they can't eat, or like they don't taste things very well. You know what I mean? They're losing taste. And some people say their vision. Vision is another huge one, and and bladder issues is another big one. So it can affect so many symptoms that can be affected by MS is what really makes it difficult to deal with.
How has it affected you guys as a family? Because I know you said, obviously I know, you guys have 2 kids. Shout out to Krista and Jacob. So how, when you got the news and you kind of processed it, Did you guys have to take certain steps to make life a little easier, or practical things, or affect you guys kind of as a family of four? Or?
So one of the things, I was having these symptoms before the actual diagnosis, a lot of them. No one really knew why, but they knew that I probably need help getting in the car or getting out of the car or getting up steps. So they were kind of already doing those things. So I always say, like, I think my kids made it the easiest transition with my diagnosis, just because they were already living it. And they were already stepping in and doing things. So now it was kind of just, okay, I was having these issues, and now there's a reason, and here's what it is, and this is what it means, could mean for our family. So for me, I think the hardest thing is asking, for help, because I'm an independent person. I'm the one who needs to help other people and take care of my kids and my family. So asking for help is probably one of the hardest things. But they were probably the easiest to tell, other than, once I said to them, this is not a death sentence. I'm not going to die from this. Yes, our lives are going to change. We're not going to be able to go to amusement parks, and I'm not going to be able to walk around all day long. I'll have to take breaks, and so explaining those kind of things.
And it's a lot of things like where it's not that we can't do things. It's just you just got to modify how you do it.
Right.
So I think that was part of it too. And our kids at the time, where Crystal was 14, Jacob was he was 10.
Yeah.
So it was kind of almost like a great, it's never great, but like a great age range for them to be in, because they were old enough to understand. Right. They weren't so little that we have to do every little thing for them,
right.
And at the same time, they're old enough to help out, and they're old enough to understand what's going on, and I'm sure for them it was very scary. You know what I mean? Like not knowing exactly what it was and how it's going to change, and then hearing some of the things like things will change in a certain kind of way, but also being positive for them and kind of making sure that they know that it's not like we're going to stop living life. We're going to do things. We're just going to have to change the way we do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. If I remember correctly, I think March is MS Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got that right. With it being MS Awareness Month, for you guys that are in the thick of it all, what are some ways people can educate themselves, that they can be more aware of MS or people with them, or helping out? What would be a good way to be more aware of those things?
Yeah, Megan. So of course, most people know that it's called the MS Society. MS Society has a website, and they have what's called the Navigator on there, where you can check it out. There's a ton of information on their website that will show you, basically what to expect. They actually have, you can contact somebody who has MS to get a perspective from. They have like MS Friends, I think it's called, or something like that. So you can chat with somebody who's going through some of the same, similar situations that you are.
You can also search for support groups in your area, which was a big thing for us, like being able to talk to other people face to face about what you're going through. So you are able to search for that on there.
There's a ton of stuff online you can find. I mean, that's the first thing we did when we found out what the diagnosis was to start, like we said, educating ourselves, looking to find out like what kind of symptoms there are, how to deal with those symptoms, who to see. So we were sent like right away once she got our MRI results back. Like we said, we were sent to Hopkins to see a neurologist. So you're gonna want to have a great relationship with your neurologist. And then once you get a treatment plan in place,
you basically
finding out about the medication you're going to be on and weighing your options with medications too is a big thing. There's so many different medications now. There used to be very little, but now there's a ton of different medications they can try you with, and knowing the pros and cons.
And once you get through those things, you basically need a team of different doctors, because like we said, it affects so many different things. So one of the biggest things that you can do as far as managing symptoms physically, I think, is to do physical therapy. So the one thing you want to look for is someone who specializes either in MS, if you have someone that's great, or spinal cord injuries, those kind of things, so that they can help you get stronger, and so that you're able to do your day-to-day activities more efficiently. So, you might need a psychiatrist. You might, there's multiple different things that I wish when you got a diagnosis that they gave you a packet and said, here you go, here's all the things. But they're getting closer to that, but it's not there yet. So something like the National MS Society website can guide you in, saying I'm having this issue where, what's around me that I can use to help me with this.
There's also the MSA or MSSA or something like that? Yeah, which is like the Multiple Sclerosis Association, which is a little different than the society. They have a website as well. You can sign up to MS Caretaker Chris on YouTube as well. Seeing from, because what we've noticed is there's a lot of information you can find for someone who is actually dealing with MS. Not as much for people who are caretakers or have a loved one that has MS. So what I try to do is take a look from a different perspective, from the caretaker perspective, like what I see, my experiences, that kind of thing, which I think is very, I've done videos where, talking about different things that might help, with someone who has MS, or like what I've seen, in just a short 4 years that we've been dealing with it. And like I just bought some books. We're reading up on some books from famous people who have MS to see their perspective and different material that you can use as a caretaker to kind of enhance your knowledge or change your day-to-day life from what you need to do. But there's a ton of support online as well. It's not just like websites, but like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any one of those social media sites you go on, you can find different support pages, support groups, and I belong to a ton of them, so I can also see what other people are dealing with, and like I'm grateful for what we have and what we deal with and the support system we have and those kind of things, because there's a lot of horror stories you can read about online too, from an MS perspective. So there's a ton of information out there now that previously wasn't out there. So
yeah, I mean, what a huge resource. I mean, say what you will about this time we're in, but I mean, if you're going through something like that, all the wealth of resources we have, online is absolutely incredible. Kind of concluding that raising awareness piece and helping and what can people do. I guess the question for you both is, what would you say someone's listening right now who's maybe just got diagnosed or knows somebody who just got diagnosed, what would you say to that person, somebody who's just kind of taking this on for the first time and doesn't know what to do?
I would say, I know that you're scared and nervous and there's big things ahead, but know that it's not a death sentence and that it's something that you're able to live with day to day. It may not be easy, but there to gain as much support as you can, because I think that's where the biggest need is that there are tons of people out there that don't have support. So if for some reason you don't have support through someone in your family or close relative, that kind of thing, look for support other ways. Look online, look for a support group, those kind of things.
Yeah, I would say educate yourself pretty much. Knowledge is power. So the more you find out, the more the more you know, and then
be your own advocate.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Being your own advocate.
Ask questions. When
you see a doctor, when you see a neurologist, don't just settle for, a lot of times you go to see a specialist, you don't get a lot of time.
Right.
Their time is valuable. So you go in to see a neurologist and they say, oh yeah, you got MS, we're going to treat it this. We've been really lucky. I mean, the neurologist we have, top neurologist at Hopkins, he took the time to answer every question we had. Elena went in with a notebook.
But along those lines, be prepared. Yeah. Educate yourself. Write down your questions before you get there, because your mind's going to be all over the place. So I took those couple of days that it took for me to get an appointment to research, to ask write down all of my questions, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything as I was getting this news that,
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And again, so like you're going to see a neurologist, like she said, they're going to send you to a bunch of different places. Then you're going to have to find out, like, optic neurologist is one you may have to see, and like you get in there, they're going to be kind of quick. They're going to want to run a gambit of tests, and like you have no idea what you're dealing with. You have no idea what they're talking about. They use different terms you're not familiar with. The medications, making sure you find out what are the pros and cons for medications, because you have side effects from those medications. I mean, is that medication going to cause you more issues than MS itself? like you don't know, so you want to weigh and choose what medication. A lot of times your neurologist is gonna have something that they suggest. They're gonna want to go with a certain type of medication, but educating yourself on that, and hey, well, what about this one? I heard about this one. We constantly, whenever we have an appointment, we go in with like, hey, we heard about this new thing coming out. Like, what is that? Because a neurologist really, when they're talking to you, they're not going to go and say, hey, by the way, like they're checking out this new medication that may wake up cells that can repair myelin. So you have to be the one maybe asking those questions when you go in. So kind of educating yourself, being prepared, being an advocate for your own health, and don't settle for just every little thing you're told,
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think a big part of that too is kind of what you've said it already a couple times, but when you're describing it to your kids, like, look, this is a big deal, this is a big adjustment our family's going to have to do, but like you said, this is not a death sentence. This is something that we can adjust to, and we can figure it out, and this just might be our new normal,
right,
and our new kind of way of living. And in that way, it's really great because it gives that hope and it gives that encouragement, for something as each day, starting each day new and taking it day by day. Where do you guys feel like you get that encouragement or hope from? What is that? When do you get that strength from?
So one of the things, when I was first diagnosed, the next day I made a decision to go to work, just because I didn't know what else to do. And on my way to work, I was on 95, and for some reason the sun was just extremely bright in this one section, and I just remember God saying to me, this is not going to be easy, but I'm going to be here every step of the way. And so I think I don't think that I got this diagnosis by accident or because I've done something. I think it was on purpose. I feel like not just myself, but the rest of our family have become closer to God through this. And I do believe that was his intention. So I think spiritually we've all become closer to God. And that's been a big thing for our family. So
I think it's also drawn us closer. I mean,
as a family. Yeah,
as a family, just together. You know what I mean? We all had to make adjustments. We all, it shows how much we love and care for each other. I look up to her to be able to deal with this. I know, she thanks me all the time for things I do, but she doesn't realize how strong she is, and some of the things she brings to the table, and some of the things that we notice and we know she's doing for us. Like, hey, a lot of people could have put their hands up and be like, I don't want to work anymore. I'm giving up. I'm just going to live the rest of my life and do the things I want to do. And for us, it's not like that. She cares for her family. She wants to work. She wants to be better. She's going to fight this thing head on, and it gives us strength to them when we have tough times. Like, hey, look what your mother's dealing with, or look what my wife's dealing with. And a lot of times we can look up to that, and it helps strengthen us along the way too. So.
And it also, we're reaching out to people who are newly diagnosed and in our support group, and we're able to help, and we know how, what it felt like to be newly diagnosed, and trying to just explain to people, we've been there, we understand. So kind of reaching out, and for those people who don't have the support system, and kind of being that support for them.
Yeah.
And as far as support systems go too, like our family and our friends, and it's kind of brought us all closer when we really think about it. I mean, I know, our parents, her parents and my parents, have always been there along the way. Anything you need, let us know. If it's just hey, you can't be there for an infusion, or you can't be there for a doctor visit, we'll take her, not a problem. I think the night we found out about the diagnosis, our best friends, the four of them were at our house that night, even though, we're thinking to ourselves, like, man, do we really want to have all this attention right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're kind of grieving it, when you first find out about it. But to be honest with you, like, I wouldn't have changed a thing, shoulders to cry on, people to talk you through it, having those close friends and family to be part of that. And our support system is so big, I can't even, I can't imagine what it would be without everybody.
Yeah.
So. All right, so in this second segment, we are actually going to take a look at questions that I actually have for Joshua and Brandon about spiritual strength during tough times. I really hope you enjoy this part.
Do our best to answer
All right.
stuff.
So first, I want to thank you guys for both being able to allow me to be on your podcast, and I'm gonna, like I said, have some stuff here on MS Caretaker Chris, and I want to start off with a few questions. I know, Josh, I know you guys met. I guess you guys met in college.
Yeah,
Did you
we
meet in
did.
college,
Mhm.
and that was at MacU.
The MacU back in 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that. So, yeah.
So I guess I wanted to ask you some things about spirituality and dealing with trying times and difficult things. So when someone gets a diagnosis or bad news, it sometimes seems like the very first thing they do is start to lose faith. Sometimes, like, why me, or like, why am I having to deal with this? Is God mad at me? That kind of thing. So that being said, what are some things that people can do to kind of strengthen themselves in their faith and get that trust back that sometimes they lose during tough times like this?
Yeah.
Hard
You want to
question.
go, Brandon? You want me to go?
You want me to go first? I can go
Sure.
first. Yeah, no, that is a great question, and that's so true. That often seems to be the first thing that people kind of question. The biggest example I can think of personally, and I won't dwell on this too long because it's not about this isn't about my diagnosis, but about MS and you guys. But I'll share this just because I think it's relevant. For me, it was almost a little over 2 years ago now. I was actually diagnosed with cancer, and I'm good now. Thank the Lord. I'm healthy. But that was a huge thing. It was that was a huge diagnosis. It was scary. It was everything. But looking back on it, I think those questions kind of came in my mind at the time, like, oh my goodness, this is huge. This is scary. This is yeah, sure. Why me? Is this punishment? All those things are going to kind of race in your mind. But I also look back on that time, and it was like that was one of those few moments where, like you said about a support system, people came through for me during that time. I look back and I had all my friends around, my family, everyone kind of rallied around and was there at the hospital and at home. And, those were actually some of the, in a weird way, some of the best weeks of my life, of kind of following up that diagnosis and go through surgery and all that stuff. It was scary, but it was also like, man, this is when I almost felt more alive. I almost felt more like, okay, man, we're really in it now. And the hard times kind of brought everyone together and kind of showed, like, man, people do come through. God came through. And so, the long and short for me was it kind of forced me to become more aware of the people in my life and aware of my faith. And it kind of made it a little bit more real for me because it was so scary.
For sure.
I don't know if you have anything to add there, Josh.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing because, like you said, almost everyone, you go immediately to that question of why me, why is this happening? Even questioning God in general. If God is real, why would He allow this to happen? Why is this even a thing? And so, a lot of it again, I think, goes back to the idea of control. Of we want to be in control of these things, and if God truly is in control, then why did He not save me from this, or why did He not help me with this? But the answer, there's not really a clear answer for it, but the answers that we find in Scripture is that God is always in control, even in the things that we feel that the answers we may not like, or the situations we don't enjoy finding ourselves in, the hardships. Scripture tells us that God is close to the brokenhearted, and so a lot of people feel like when you go through something hard that God just isn't there, when really it's the opposite. That when you're going through hardships, God is closer to you than ever. He's in the midst of everything you're going through. He's right in the middle of everything, and so I would encourage I haven't gone through a ton of hardships, or any very tough diagnosis or anything like that, but everyone has their difficult days. Everyone has their stuff they struggle with, whether it's in your marriages or your family life, being a father or a parent or work or whatever it is. There's always going to be something that's going to maybe even make you question. And even questioning is not bad. Asking those questions is how you kind of grow as a Christian, of like figuring out what your faith is and how you can strengthen your faith. But I think that's the biggest thing I would say is knowing that we're not in control all the time, and that's okay. God is in control, and we are not alone when we go through these things. and God is with us. And when we come out of these things, even if it's not the way we had planned, God's strength and power is still there with us. So.
And what you said reminded me of something. Just one thing to add on, if we can keep going. The other thing I think I felt during that time when I was going through the health sort of scare myself, like you said, the question of why me, or being punished, it almost kind of forced me to reckon with kind of how small I am in the big picture as well. I think that was a huge thing that kind of, I guess, forced me to come closer to God in the moment. Was, yeah, sure, why me, but also why not me? There's billions of people in the world. God doesn't stop being good just because, why wouldn't it be me? There are millions of people that struggle with all sorts of things every single day, so this just happens to be a thing that I'm going through now. And, in that, God is still consistent. God is still powerful and strong and good. And, that doesn't change, just because now it's on my front doorstep, it doesn't suddenly change the entire structure of how life goes, And so a lot of those feelings kind of, while they're scary and they're valid, a lot of those feelings also kind of stem from sort of being wrapped up in your own world and your own life, and you're kind of laser focused on those things, but you're like, oh wait, like I'm part of something way, way bigger than just what I'm experiencing, and way bigger than my own life. I'm really part of everything, and it kind of really brings that to your awareness. So that was a huge thing for me too.
All right, so how do you feel like, for me, I feel like you need to not only be mentally and physically strong when it comes to a lot of things, but you need to be spiritually strong. Do you feel like a lot of people think about that? How do you feel about that? Do you feel that being spiritually focused and spiritually strong is just as big a deal as staying mentally and physically strong?
I do. I think it is. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I know I'm not physically strong. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you can be mentally strong and you can be physically strong or even emotionally strong, but even people that, in my opinion, even people who don't believe in God, something is making their spirit strong, whether that's people or their family or their support system, or if they do yoga or if they do something peaceful, meditation, something is making their spirit strong. Now, I like to think that God is in a lot of different things, and so God uses our families, he uses our friends, he uses, if yoga is something that makes you feel better, I think that's something that God can help through your spirit, stuff like that. Sure. And so I think it's important. I think it can be a really, really hard road if you don't find that hope. Right. Yeah. Even if you find it in your family or your kids, if you can't find that hope to get up the next morning to be physically strong, I don't think it matters then. I think it's important, and so.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, honestly, that was the biggest thing that attracted me to faith in the first place. I mean, I was raised in church, but what I think really made me interested in it on my own, kind of in my teen years, was the idea of purpose. And I feel like that's kind of what that is for me, being spiritually strong. It kind of, being mentally strong and learning and being physically strong are all important. But I think for me, it kind of, that point about spiritual strength is kind of where it all comes together. What am I being physically and mentally strong for? What is the meaning behind bothering to exercise and to take care of yourself and to learn new things? It's to be used for something. And I think that's really where the spiritual strength is vital, because, again, like Josh said, whether you're a Christian or not, or whatever is driving you, that's what you're harnessing that strength for. And so I think that's a huge sense of purpose that, for me, I carry with me everywhere I go, or at least I try to. And so I think that's absolutely a huge part of the picture.
For those that are definitely who grab on to staying spiritually strong during rough times, difficult times. So I know for like us with MS, at times it can be, draining. She can be so fatigued. Again, we have a good support system. There are a lot of people who may not quite have as big a support system, or may not have a loved one there with them at all times. So someone who wants to stay strong spiritually, but physically can't get to church, and to be able to hear the word at church, or to have that group of people at a church surrounding them to be able to help lift them up. What are some other ways that they can stay spiritually strong or grow in their spirituality?
We're kind of in a situation like that now with people who can't get the church.
Right.
And so, obviously my hope is that churches are putting forth effort to reach those people, anybody, to where if they're originally they'd be visiting, or if they're using social media to outreach or stuff like that. I think that's good, and I think that's really great that churches do that. I do think something that will be not really, I guess, maybe more effective, but long-term effectiveness would be creating a schedule, creating a routine for your life, your daily week, or whatever it is, where you incorporate Christ into your life. Whether that be your own Bible studies before you go to bed, or a family Bible study together at some point, even something as simple as having a Sabbath, having a day you set aside where from 1 o'clock on Saturday to 1 o'clock on Sunday, I know that I'm not going to be looking at my phone, or I know that I am going to be spending more intentional time with my kids, or like Friday nights we eat dinner at the dinner table. All of those things, and you can incorporate Scripture and God in those moments, and I think that's probably the best way and the most effective way to stay connected to your faith and to Jesus, when you incorporate it into your own life, incorporate it into your family, and you start doing those things as a family more regularly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. Like Brennan noted about the, kind of right now, everyone's sort of doing this long distance church thing. And it is kind of bringing to mind for a lot of people, like, man, this is more than just an event that we go to, or a building, or a single day of the week. There's 6 other days of the week to account for that's happening outside of church, what's happening there. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of people thinking smaller, thinking about their neighborhood, thinking about, the small group of people that they really spend time with, how to engage with them. In the absence of a crisis, for me throughout the week, outside of, a Sunday morning, I try to think of ways, in my daily routine, even ones that either I manufacture and intentionally do, or ways that are just presented to me, like my job. I don't work in ministry in church anymore. I work in a day program with adults with disabilities. That's what I do every day. And there's moments in that when, I'm teaching a class with, a dozen people with disabilities, and maybe it's a social skills class, maybe it's a history class, but there's moments in that when I'm like, man, this kind of feels like church a little bit. Like, this is a chance to care and love people that, really need an example in their life. And so I seizing some of those moments, even outside of a church setting, to say, how can I care for the people that are around me, whether it's a church or small group, whether it's at work, whether it's your neighbors, finding those moments to connect and serve the people that are in your life. It's a huge way.
Great. Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I think you're spot on with, like, right now we're in a time where it basically feels like that. I mean, we're all in the same boat right now where we can't attend a Sunday service at church. So it's been great. Like, I know our church has done online services. They're actually coming up with like an on-demand type service right now too. So it's not just Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. It can be whenever you need it, or whenever you feel you need it in your life. And I know our church is big on making sure, and our pastor's big on telling us that, make the Bible a standard in your life. Make time for the Bible each and every day if you can. And I think what I'd like to say to our audience right now too is the fact that, like, now is a great time to be able to take that time where you're home, where you don't have to be focused on work, you don't have to be focused on so many things outside of your household, and strengthen the inside of your household, and strengthen your family, and strengthen your day and your mind to take that time to figure out a schedule, and say and reflect on what you're doing already, and say, like I said to Elena the other night, I said, I think we need to make more time as a family to look at the Bible and to read the Bible and dig into some scripture a little bit, and to strengthen our lives with that, because looking back and looking at like how we did things day to day before we had this crisis that's got everybody down and hunkered down and sheltered, is like, we did this. Okay, we dropped, for Elena, dropped off at school, went to work, got home, we had dinner, watched some TV, we had our favorite shows to watch, and before you know it, you're back in bed and you're starting the whole process over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of people live that kind of life, especially nowadays. They have so much on their plate. You have kids who may be in sports, you have kids who are in dance, you have, activities you like to do, and you sure do make time to go out on the weekend with your friends, or you sure do make time for this. Are you making sure that you make time spiritually to strengthen yourself and to take time to be with God? So I do think that's something that a lot of people can take a look at right now and build on that while we have this time, and be able to self-reflect a little bit on that. So that was the questions I had for you guys. I greatly appreciate the time, and greatly appreciate you guys answering those for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank everyone for taking time to view this video, and I encourage you to go in the description and click on the link for Deep and Wide to hear the podcast in its entirety.
And as always, I want to thank everybody again. If you have not yet done so, please click the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications, like, share, and please tell all your friends about MS Caretaker Chris. Thanks again.
Thank you.